You are not angry because something went wrong. You are angry because something inside you has never been heard. Read that again. Not with your mind, with your chest. What you are about to hear is not anger management. It is not breathing exercises. It is something Carl Jung discovered about the human psyche that most people spend their entire lives never understanding. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Lesson 1. Anger is not your enemy. It is a signal. Imagine this. You are driving home after the worst day of your week. Someone cuts you off. Suddenly your chest tightens, your jaw locks, and you are shouting at someone you will never see again. The question is, was it really about the traffic? Jung would say no. He spent his life studying the hidden architecture of the human soul, not to fix it, not to sanitize it, but to understand what it was trying to say. And what he found was this. Every intense emotion is a signal, not a malfunction, not a character flaw, a message. The person who cut you off did not create your anger. They simply unlocked a door that was already under enormous pressure. So the real question, the one most people never ask, is not, how do I stop feeling this? The real question is, what is this trying to show me? Perhaps a boundary that has been crossed so many times you stop noticing. Perhaps a version of yourself that was never allowed to exist. Perhaps grief that has been waiting years to finally be felt. That shift from fighting the emotion to listening to it is where everything begins to change. But here is where it gets harder, because listening to your anger requires something most people are never taught: the ability to feel it completely without becoming it. Lesson 2. The difference between reacting and responding. There was a man, I will call him David, 42 years old, successful, by every external measure, composed. But in his marriage he would erupt. Not often. But when he did, the fury was disproportionate to whatever had actually happened. His wife would say something small, a comment about how he loaded the dishwasher, and he would feel it like an attack on his entire existence. David came to understand, eventually, that he was not reacting to the dishwasher. He was reacting from a child who grew up in a home where nothing he did was ever quite right. Jung called this the unconscious driving from the dark. The body moves faster than conscious thought. By the time you are aware of your anger, your body has already decided what it wants to do with it. This is why you say things you cannot take back. Why you hand your peace to someone who may not even remember the conversation by evening. The difference between reacting and responding is not willpower. It is the pause. Not the pause of suppression, not swallowing the feeling and pretending it is not there. The pause of witnessing, stepping back just for a moment, and watching the emotion the way you might watch a wave from the shore. You see it, you feel it, but you are not inside it. Every time you choose that pause, every time you breathe before you speak, you are strengthening something that cannot be taken from you. But what happens when you don't pause? When you push the anger down instead? Jung had a warning about that. And it is one of the darkest things he ever observed about human nature. Lesson 3. What suppression actually does. Picture a dam. Built carefully, reinforced, holding back an enormous weight of water. For years it holds. And then one morning, something small, a hairline crack, and the entire structure gives way. Jung called this enantiodromia, the principle that anything pushed to one extreme inevitably swings to its opposite. The person who prides themselves on never getting angry eventually erupts with a force that shocks even themselves. The one who says, "I am fine" for months, one day cannot get out of bed. What you deny does not disappear. It goes underground, and underground, it grows. So the answer is not suppression, and it is not explosion. It is understanding. But to truly understand your anger, you have to understand something Jung called the shadow. And once you understand this, you will never look at the people who trigger you the same way again. Lesson 4. The shadow. The part of you no one told you about. Think about a child. From the moment that child enters the world, they begin learning which parts of themselves are acceptable, which emotions get approval, which behaviors are rewarded, which parts of them make the adults around them comfortable. And the parts that don't, the child buries them, not consciously. Survival requires it. Those buried parts form what Jung called the shadow, a second self, an underground version of you, accumulating everything you rejected, everything you were told was too much, everything that didn't get approval. But here is what most people miss. The shadow is not just darkness. It contains your unlived life, your unexpressed creativity, your buried confidence, your unfelt grief, your unspoken truth. Gold and darkness, both locked in the same underground vault. And the shadow does not wait quietly. It finds ways out. Ways that, once you see them, you will recognize immediately. The person who irritates you beyond all reason, the colleague whose confidence makes you want to leave the room, the stranger online whose opinion somehow gets under your skin for 3 days? Jung would say, that reaction is not about them. That charge, that disproportionate heat, is your shadow looking back at you through their face. He called it projection. The unconscious mind takes what it cannot accept internally and places it externally, onto people, onto situations, onto the world. And here's the question that changes everything. When you think of the person who triggers you most, is there any version of what bothers you about them living inside you? A confidence you were taught to suppress? A need you learned was shameful? A desire buried so deep you forgot it was yours? Until you make the unconscious conscious, Jung said, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. But wait, because what lives inside the shadow is even more specific than this. And it explains something that brilliant, ambitious people find almost impossible to admit. Lesson 5. Why you want so much and do so little. You are not lazy. I want to say that again, because most people have spent years believing the opposite. You are not lazy. Jung mapped the human psyche as a system of functions. The way you think, the way you feel, the way you sense the world, the way you intuit. One of these functions became dominant, the one that got the most practice, the most approval, the most development. And its opposite became the inferior function, underdeveloped, unconscious, and, as Jung described it, contaminated by the shadow. If you are a visionary thinker, someone who sees the big picture, who lives in ideas and possibilities, your inferior function is likely sensation, the physical, the practical, the step-by-step. And ambition requires exactly that, not vision, not inspiration, execution, repetition, the unglamorous daily work of building something real. So when you sit down to finally do the work, when it is time to execute, you are not just doing something difficult. You are brushing against the shadow. Every fear of being exposed as mediocre, every terror of being seen as a beginner, every memory of being humiliated for not knowing something. And the ego panics and retreats back to thinking about the goal, planning the goal, talking about the goal, and the work stays undone. This is not a productivity problem. It is a depth psychology problem. And the solution is not a habit tracker. It is something Jung called individuation, the lifelong process of integrating every part of yourself, including the parts you are most afraid to be. Which means you have to be willing to do it badly. Write the clumsy first paragraph, record the imperfect first video, take the awkward first step your dominant self screams is beneath you. Not because it will be good, but because doing it badly is the only door through and out the other side. Now, everything we have explored so far, nowhere does it become more intense, more urgent, more painful than in the people we love. Lesson 6. Why you attract who you attract. A woman I once read about, a therapist's patient described in one of the great case studies of Jungian analysis, had the same relationship 3 times. Different men, different faces, different cities, same dynamic, same wound, same ending. She could not understand why this kept happening to her, until she began to understand that it was not happening to her. It was happening from her. Jung discovered something remarkable about romantic love. What we call falling in love is almost never what we think it is. He called it the anima, in men, the inner feminine, and the animus, in women, the inner masculine, the unconscious counterpart to our conscious identity, the undeveloped opposite living inside us. When we fall powerfully in love with someone, we are often falling in love with our own anima or animus projected onto them, which is why when the projection fades and we begin to see the real person, the relationship often collapses. Not because the love was false, but because the projection was. And the anger we feel at partners, that disproportionate fury, is often the anima or animus speaking, enraged that this person cannot complete what only we can complete in ourselves. The antidote is not finding the right person. It is becoming a more whole version of yourself, so that you enter relationships from fullness, not from the desperate hope that someone else will fill what you have buried. But here is where Jung gets most uncomfortable. Because some of our anger in relationships is not projection at all. It is the accumulated weight of everything we allowed and never said. Lesson 7. The weight of everything you never said. Every time you said yes when your whole body said no, every time you stayed silent to keep the peace, every time you allowed someone to cross a line you never clearly drew, you deposited something into a hidden account. And accounts fill up. This is why people erupt at something small, a comment, a look, a tone, and the response feels completely disproportionate because it is carrying years of everything that was never said. Jung was direct about this. He said, "What we do not resist becomes our fate." The answer is not to explode, and it is not to keep suppressing. It is to draw the line from a place of self-respect. before the accumulation becomes unbearable. Not from anger, not from resentment, from a quiet, clear knowing of your own worth. The ego reacts, the self responds. The ego demands, the self establishes. The ego collapses or explodes. The self holds its ground without needing to fight for it. And that, right there, is the beginning of what Jung called the third path. Lesson 8. The third path, and the work of a lifetime. You have been taught two options with anger: suppress it or release it. Jung offered a third: conscious containment. Think of fire in a vessel. Uncontained, it destroys. Suppressed, it extinguishes into cold ash. But fire held in a vessel creates light, creates warmth, creates the energy needed to transform. That vessel is your consciousness. And building it, strengthening it, requires 5 practices that Jung returned to throughout his entire life. The first, the pause. 3 deliberate breaths before responding to anything that activates you. Not to suppress. To create the microsecond between stimulus and response where your freedom lives. The second, the inner language. Notice what you whisper to yourself. This always happens to me. No one ever listens. I am always the one who gets hurt. These sentences are emotional fuel. Begin replacing them, slowly and with language that is honest but not catastrophic. The third, the mirror question. When someone triggers strong anger, ask one question before you react. Not what is wrong with them. What part of me is responding here? Even asking, without an immediate answer, shifts you from ego to self. The fourth, conscious silence. 5 minutes each day of genuine stillness. No screens, no tasks, just your breath and the quiet. These 5 minutes become a sanctuary, a place no one can reach, from which you can respond from wisdom rather than wound. The fifth, the journal. Write to the anger. Ask it what it wants. Ask it what it is protecting. Ask it what it has been trying to say for years. You may be surprised by what answers. And through all of this, one truth holds. You will not complete this work. There is no moment when you arrive, when the shadow is fully integrated, when you never react from the wound again. Jung worked on his own individuation until the day he died, because the point was never completion, it was direction. Are you moving toward wholeness, even imperfectly, even slowly, even with setbacks that feel like you have not moved at all? Every time you pause before reacting, that is individuation. Every time you ask what this is really about, that is individuation. Every time you hold the feeling without becoming it, that is individuation. You are not trying to become a different person. You are trying to become more fully the person you already are. The light and the shadow, the dominant and the inferior, the known and the terrifyingly unknown. That wholeness is not a destination. It is a way of walking through the world. You came to this video perhaps looking for a way to manage your anger. But Jung never offered management. He offered understanding. And there is a profound difference between a life where you manage your emotions and a life where you understand them so deeply that they no longer need to manage you. That second life is possible. Not easy, not quick, but possible. If something in this video landed somewhere real, comment the word mirror below. It tells me this kind of depth is what you came here for. And next week, we explore the one concept Jung said was more dangerous than the shadow itself. The persona. The mask most people spend their entire lives trapped inside, without ever realizing it is not who they are. Subscribe to Vel Mind, and I will see you there.